One day, I was eating lunch with Big Sister, and she asked me a very interesting question. What game would you consider perfect? It was an interesting question because I often praise the Assassin's Creed games, but I also criticize them, in private and publicly, and to be frank, I wouldn't call any AC game perfect. Assassin's Creed 1 is one of my favorite and most replayed games of all time. The story is great, the characters interesting, and the philosophy gripping. The gameplay, albeit repetitive, is also not as bad as people often think. However, for as much as I praise this game, I wouldn't call it a perfect game either. When you start the game, you will realize that it doesn't want you to start playing it. The menu system is confusing, the tutorials endless, and then Altair talks, breaking the whole scene apart with his superb acting method.
Not fortune, skill. Watch a while longer and you might learn something.
And don't get me wrong, I like Philip Shava's portrayal of Altair, and I could make a whole fanboy video gushing over how cool his Altair is. But his acting was not good in this game. I bet Altair broke everyone's immersion the first time they heard him talk, because that's exactly what he did to me. So you can guess why I wouldn't call this game perfect. For as good as it is, and for as favorite of mine as it will always be. Another game that I have praised a lot recently is Dark Souls, and that one certainly gets closer to perfection than AC1, but even so, I wouldn't call it perfect, because even if the level design is amazing, the combat engaging, the characters interesting, and the music superb, the game on the other hand has some boring boss fights, some jank, and the second half of the game is noticeably weaker than the first half by a lot. So what game has the perfect balance of good story, interesting characters, fun gameplay, good exploration that feels relevant and not over-bloated, seamless pacing, satisfying ending, intuitive interface, well-designed AI, good level design that serve both the story and the gameplay, responsive controls and minimal jank? Well, the answer that came to mind almost immediately was The Last of Us. The Last of Us is without a doubt one of the most renowned and acclaimed games of all time, a household name at this point, so renowned in fact that HBO is now making a TV show based on this story. However, this game throughout the years has suffered due to its success. The game is so famous and so acclaimed that at times, people forget why it is so good in the first place. There are people that have even gotten sick of the game and blame it for many of the bad trends that the video game industry has adopted during the last decade or so. Today, I want to explore why people have grown distant or distasteful towards this game, and kind of defend the program, because I don't think The Last of Us is the main reason why video games have grown so boring, quote-unquote, during the last years. The Last of Us, in my humble opinion, is still the closest thing to the best game ever made, and I'm going to explain why. It's time to show and tell, so sit back, relax, and let us begin.
You make every shot count.
You see, I believe everything happens for a reason.
We don't have to do this. You know that, right?
After all we've been through, everything that I've done, it can't be for nothing.
People are always calling this game a walking simulator, that you can fall asleep while playing the game, and so on and on. Many of you have probably heard these arguments before and seen videos made around them. But the truth is that this game is not a walking simulator, hardly. In fact, one of the things this game does best is the pacing. There are walking segments, yes, but they are always filled with interesting character exposition. The game knows how to slow down and let you smell the roses before assaulting you with another suspenseful action sequence. I never feel as if I am doing too much of one thing and too little of the other, because the game is always flowing and never getting stuck on one situation for too long. The game is also always balancing the emotions that it wants the player to feel. You have this emotional opening sequence. The father and the daughter in their last birthday together, a few hours before the outbreak begins, and then the daughter dies in one of the most dramatic sequences ever seen in a video game. Afterwards, we have a time jump, in which we see an older Joel now in a completely different stage of his life, but still haunted by the memories of his deceased daughter. Then Tess, Joel's partner, is introduced. Tess is the perfect tutorial character, and a complete contrast to everything we have seen so far in the game. She is sexy, badass, a character that rapidly pushes the story forward, but also a profound character. Her spunkiness makes an interesting contrast to the more introverted Joel, but when you see the two of them walking quietly in the woods outside the quarantine zone, you see a similar gentleness and a low-spoken understanding of one another that is immediately captivating. Truth be told, Tess is such an interesting character, and her dynamic with Joel is so compelling to watch that the game could have continued with these two without introducing Ellie, and it still would have been a good game. Obviously a different game, and probably not as successful and resonant as it turned out to be with Ellie, but still a good game. Whenever I play this game, I never feel the urge to rush the time I spend with Tess, enjoying it while it lasts. After the quiet time in the woods in which we are introduced to a few tutorials and then the walk through the slums to build atmosphere and tension, we are thrown into what is formally the first encounter of the game with human enemies. This sequence escalates in difficulty as you progress, each room adding more enemies and more complex level design, culminating in the harbor sequence in which you not only have to handle an insane amount of enemies for an early game encounter, but afterwards have to chase Robert down the corridors until you catch him and Tess kills him. Apparently things are going to slow down, but then Marlene is introduced, and now you have to help her bypass the Fedra guards that are haunting her while the curfew warning is resonating in the background. It is once you find Ellie that things finally slow down again, and the quiet time in the room, resting with the rain outside before heading out to face danger once again, is a welcome change of pace. Then we are outside the quarantine zone again, now escorting Ellie, with the Fedra haunting us and soon enough, the infected as well. This nighttime adventure is all at once slow, fast and eerie, but it serves the very important purpose of introducing you further to the dangers that you are going to be facing on your own a few moments later. And so it goes the rest of the game. You have this moment.
Fireflies. I mean, real fireflies.
Yeah, I see that.
And then you have this moment.
Come on.
I got you.
Damn it, Bill!
What just happened?
Another one of Bill's stupid traps!
You have this moment.
I hate these things.
And then you have this other moment.
What was it like?
It was good. Real good.
Good? Can you believe this guy? Come on, man, give me details. Describe it.
The game is a constant roller coaster of emotions and excitement, perfectly dividing the story beats with an extremely underrated gameplay loop. You are always invested in something that is interesting and rewarding as you play the game, whether that is an engaging character exposition, a hilarious collectible, weapons upgrades that actually make a difference, manuals that do improve your abilities in significant ways, diaries and newsletters that flesh out the story of each region, pulse-pounding encounters with surprisingly intelligent enemies within a well-designed level, and all of these interwoven with interesting but wisely optional dialogues. The Last of Us is hardly a walking simulator. It is a very solid game. As I already said, the gameplay in this game is, in my opinion, extremely underrated. Everybody talks about the story, the characters and the controversies when it comes to this franchise. but rarely do I ever hear anyone talk about these games in terms of mechanics. The Last of Us is, without exaggerating, one of the most fluid, functional, expressive and exciting stealth games I've ever played. It is also, in my humble opinion, one of the best third-person shooters on the market. To be honest, I am not a fan of third-person shooters. If I am going to shoot at something, I would rather see the gun I am using. What makes the first-person shooters way more exciting for me. However, The Last of Us kind of sells it to me. The system is precise and intuitive, and the special effects are so brutally realistic and more impactful than even some first-person shooters out there. Another good thing with this game is that its arsenal is extremely useful. An issue that I have with other shooters is that most of the arsenal is useless. You have games like Far Cry 2 and Sniper Elite 3. These are two great games that I enjoy very much. However, both suffer of this exact issue. In Sniper Elite 3, you can only customize and improve your rifle. The other weapons stay untouched, and in Far Cry 2, I can upgrade my weapons, increasing their durability and stability, but I cannot improve their damage rate. That way, a low-end pistol will always remain low-end, forcing you to change it to a stronger one eventually. I understand that that is the idea of progression in those games, starting with less functional weapons and getting better gear as you go on, but even the more expensive and powerful weapons do not increase the damage rate very much. That way, handguns for me are rendered useless. When it comes to a gunfight, you would always do better with a shotgun, a semi-automatic or a bag of grenades. But as fancy as the Desert Eagle looks in Far Cry 2, or the Russian revolver in Sniper Elite 3, they still don't do much damage. By damage I mean being able to instant kill an enemy by shooting him anywhere. In Sniper Elite 3, even at close proximity and with the easiest difficulty, I have to land at least 2 shots to take down an enemy. Those 2 shots instantly reveal my position, so enemies will follow shortly after. In Far Cry 2, I can instant kill an enemy with the Desert Eagle, but only at close proximity, and from afar I almost have to spend an entire clip on one enemy to take him down. As I already said, if I want to go guns blazing, I would rather use a shotgun or a semi-automatic. They are still loud but shoot farther and they do more damage. If I have to get so close to the enemy for my handgun to work properly, I would rather just use a silenced pistol instead and land a headshot, or do a silent takedown. Either way, I eliminate the threat and as a plus I remain undetected. So why do I need any other pistol in these games? It doesn't take long for you to unlock the Silent Makarov in Far Cry 2, and you start Sniper Elite 3, in fact, with a Welrod, which is silent from the get-go. If you buy the complete edition or the corresponding weapons pack, you will also get the silent semi-automatic from the very beginning, which is also as silent as a Welrod and shoots faster. So why change when nothing else is better? In The Last of Us, however, all weapons are useful, including pistols. A fully upgraded revolver in this game is an extremely powerful weapon, and unlike the 9mm, it can take down enemies instantly most of the time. But even a 9mm, which is the most basic weapon in the entire game, remains practical throughout the whole campaign. The fact that in this game you can not only land headshots but also leg shots make the 9mm very useful even when fighting armored soldiers or clickers, because you can shoot them in the knee and kick them on the ground. Even if you shoot the enemy in the chest without killing them immediately, the revolvers in this game are still very useful because you are holding back the enemy while you advance, and then you can take them down with a melee attack. This strategy is slightly useful in Sniper Elite 3 if you play on the easier difficulties, in which enemies are more susceptible to your melee attacks. But in Far Cry 2, in which you manually need to change to your machete in order to do a melee attack, this strategy is really useless. In The Last of Us, however, this strategy is very powerful, even on the harder difficulties, due to how seamless it is to swap from range to melee attacks, and due to how strong they are. Now, for as good as the shooting in this game is, there is something that I consider is done even better in this game. It might come as a surprise for many out there that believe this game's gameplay is bad, but The Last of Us is, without exaggerating, one of the most fluid, functional, expressive and exciting stealth games of the last 15 years. Stealth in many games is extremely reliant on the quality of the AI and the usefulness of its tools. However, this is something that is not always done right in stealth games. The Last of Us, however, does it almost perfectly. The AI in this game is very smart. Playing this game on grounded mode is a tough but extremely immersive and rewarding challenge. Enemies hear a lot and can spot you from very far. In easier difficulties you can mantle behind them and they will not listen, but in grounded difficulty they will hear that type of thing if they are close enough. However, the intelligent AI is not just hindering, but also empowering. How many stealth games have we played in which we encounter immersive scenarios that are broken by choppy animations, dumb AI, frustrating jank, and weird bugs? Games in which things never work the way they should. Well, in The Last of Us, things work exactly as they should. If you throw a bottle, nearby enemies will listen and they will investigate, so distractions work. However, since these enemies are not dumb, not all of them will follow the noise. One of them will go and check out the noise, while the others stay slightly behind watching each other's backs. The funny thing is that this intelligence can be used to your advantage when you know what you're doing in the game. The reliability that the systems work, that noise always make noise, that enemies will investigate with caution, is part of what makes stealth in this game so useful and enjoyable. The fact that if you enter a fight with one enemy and manage to finish him quickly and silently enough before he raises the alarm, the other enemies will not know what happened immediately after. They will find out, but if you're fast on your feet, you will have left that spot a long time ago. And even better, you may leave them a little surprise. The systems in this game work so well that you can even allow yourself to be seen in order to set traps and the like. The Last of Us is one of those blessed games in which you can always break line of sight and enemies will lose track of you. They of course know that you are in the area, and believe me when I tell you that they will search the area thoroughly. But you can return to the shadows anytime you need and stealth will be available to you. That way, allowing them to see you or hear you in one spot serves as an actual decoy strategy. It is dangerous, yes, but if done well, it can work wonders. Joel is not one of those brain-dead characters that insist on fighting even when you tell them not to. This is not one of those games in which having one archer spot you on top of one rooftop automatically reveals your position to every single guard in the region with seemingly telepathic skills. No, this game works the way that it should, providing one of the best and most immersive stealth experiences out there. But one thing is telling and another is seeing. I'm going to run two versions of the same encounter, and you will see how differently they play out due to my execution and the ever-adaptive AI. I will keep this section brief, but if you want to skip it and continue with the rest of the video, you can then jump to the number on screen. With that said, let us roll the clips.
Sounds like they found it. Spread out. They might come through here.
Hey, did you hear something?
What the fuck you think you're doing? Let go! Oh, screw this. Move up. Don't lose him! Here we go!
See if you could find anything.
Did you just see me?
That was good.
Thank you.
Sounds like they found him. Spread out. They might come through here. What the hell? Get him! Table! Don't look! Hey!
Did you notice how that same encounter played out in two very different ways? How the first two enemies entered the room at two significantly different moments and therefore changed my timing for approaching them? How in one version, one of the thugs noticed me approach, forcing me to adapt on the fly, while in the other I could sneak on him easily without consuming my brick? Did you notice how Ellie behaved in each version of the encounter? In the first one, she took more direct actions within the fight, because I wasn't as efficient as I was in the second version. There were times in which she actually saved me because she held back enemies that would have otherwise shot me to death, buying me time to hide and then weakening them for me to take them down with more ease. And the game understands these little differences. The level of detail in this game is mind-boggling. The characters react differently to what happened organically within the gameplay. Notice that in the first encounter, in which Ellie partook in the action more consistently, she then talks about it, and Joel felicitates her, while in the second encounter, she says nothing of that sort because Joel could handle the entire fight without needing her help. The details in this game, and the quality of the AI, are phenomenal. This is without saying that all the tools in this game are extremely useful due to their versatility. As I've said before, a good stealth game is determined mainly by the versatility of the AI and the quality of its toolset. However, many stealth games, even the good ones, suffer of the simple fact that their toolset is mostly inclined towards one particular style of playing, without encompassing other styles even when the game is supposed to encompass more styles than one. Stealth games tend to be divided between two types of playstyles, and those are Predator Stealth and Ghosting. Predator Stealth is the type of stealth game that focuses more on hunting down targets and eliminating opponents within the shadows. A great example to that style of game is the Batman Arkham series. Even if some games like Arkham Origins and Arkham Knight include missions in which you have to tail targets and infiltrate areas without being spotted, most of the stealth in those games, and therefore most of the tools and level design, are built with the idea of hunting down enemies. Simply said, the rush of the hunt is the lifeblood of the fabulous Predator sequences. The focused nature of these missions is part of what makes them so interesting, functional, and ultimately rewarding. There is not a single useless tool in Batman's arsenal, and the whole AI and fear system is built around the idea of a group of thugs locked inside a wide room with a Dark Knight, taking them down one by one. These games are the perfect example of what Predator Stealth is. Now, ghosting in a stealth game is the exact opposite to what Predator Stealth is. Ghosting revolves around the idea of the player moving around an environment and completing tasks while arousing as little suspicion as possible. Easily, the greatest example to what ghosting is in a game is seen through the eyes of Garrett, the Master Thief, in the Thief series. In these games, you are not meant to be hunting down targets and killing everything that gets in your way. The idea of these games is to move and do your objectives without anyone realizing you were there until it is too late. Even if the games allow for a measure of aggressivity, and some missions even call for it. Most of the game and the tools you are given revolve around the idea of ghosting. Water arrows to turn off the lights, moss arrows to cover the sound of your footsteps, noisemaker arrows to create distractions, and even the most aggressive tools like the sword and the broad-headed arrows can be used for ghosting by hitting a torch with a sword to make noise, or guide your enemies away from you by landing arrows on stone walls and making a lot of noise far from where you actually are. The Thief games are focused mainly around the idea of ghosting, and most levels and tools are designed or can be adapted to that style of playing. The same way games like the Batman Arkham series are focused mainly upon the premise of a predator. However, most other stealth games strive for a middle ground, and that is where most mistakes in game design happen. You have games like the Assassin's Creed series, which struggles often between being a stealth-focused experience and a swashbuckling game, and when it comes to stealth alone, they struggle between passive stealth and aggressive stealth. Often these games encourage you to move about unseen and without killing as little guards as possible. However, the tools that you're given often revolve around taking lives. Sometimes, the very nature of the game mechanics and world design are inclined more towards combat and stealth assassinations rather than meticulous and aggressive stealth. So passive stealth or all-out ghosting becomes very difficult, if not outright impossible. Some games like AC Chronicles Shine is a stealth game through and through, and one of the best in the whole franchise. This game not only is it designed for stealth, but it even encourages it, ranking you higher the lesser you're seen and the less lives you take. However, most other games in this franchise struggle between passivity and aggressivity in terms of character traits, tools, and level design. A game like Assassin's Creed 3 is more of a combat game than a stealth game. Stealth is viable and more functional than we often believe. However, it is very difficult to pull off in contrast to the combat, which can be mastered way sooner, motivating most casual players to fight instead of hiding. The simple reality that most of your tools in that game are aggressive and loud makes stealth very difficult to pull off. The most effective way that you can do passive stealth is by finding the safest route throughout an environment using only the poison darts, which are the only silent projectile in the whole game. This is not the type of game in which you can manipulate guards without being spotted. As soon as you throw a smoke bomb or fire an arrow, you will get spotted, and the whole military force of the 13 colonies will rain down upon you. Your tools in that game are rendered useless most of the time when it comes to stealth of whatever type, particularly ghosting. These tools are better when it comes to combat and, to a lesser degree, aggressive stealth. Assassin's Creed Unity, in contrast to AC3, is more of a stealth game in general. However, when it comes to stealth in particular, the game is driving you more to do aggressive stealth instead of passive stealth. Ghosting in that game is possible, but once again, most of your tools are useless in many scenarios. That's without saying that the sheer density of patrolling guards in that game makes ghosting a headache. You will rely most of the time on your disguise skill, so unlock it fast and find as many items to boost its durability and recharge time. You will also rely heavily on smoke bombs and cherry bombs to blind and distract guards, so keep your stack full and equip belts that allow you to carry more of these. Even so, passive stealth, funny as it might seem, was easier at times in games like Black Flag, because in that game you have sleeping darts that knock unconscious all types of enemies in the game. Rogue expanded the system even more by adding sleeping bombs that can knock down more than one enemy at a time, and by giving you noisemaker darts that are easier to fire and work more consistently than the cherry bombs of Unity. The simple reality that you can use your non-lethal attacks in high profile and in the air also makes the non-lethal approach more viable in the Kenway games than it is in Unity, or Syndicate for that matter. And Assassin's Creed is not the only stealth franchise that suffers of misbalanced tools. Other great stealth games like Shadwen, for example, suffer of the same exact issue. Combat is inexistent in that game. If you get spotted, you instantly die, so stealth is the only tool available in that game. The game encourages both pacifists and Reapers by giving you achievements for playing the missions one way and then the other. I actually played the game twice. The first time it was a ghost run, moving about without being seen and without killing a single guard. However, upon doing that, I realized that the tools the game was giving me really didn't help me at all on that first playthrough, because what good is to craft poison darts if I can't poison anyone? So I was unlocking tools more for the second playthrough than the actual one. I did my ghost run mainly by pulling barrels with my grapnel and by making noise with this rolling metal ball, and I got to really try out the rest of the arsenal in my second Stealth Reaper playthrough. I just wish I had more tools to make my ghost run slightly easier and more fun. Stealth in The Last of Us is certainly inclined towards elimination. Ghosting is possible in some sections, like the dormitory rooms in the Colorado University and the Firefly Lab at the ending. But most encounters in the game require you to take down all the enemies in one section before moving on. Some optional dialogues happen only if the area is clear of enemies. This, however, doesn't mean that the tools are not useful in different ways. Tools like the cocktail molotov or the nail bomb are introduced as aggressive weapons, and thus it would surprise you if I tell you that you can use them in a non-lethal manner. Fire is a good way of attracting both human and infected enemies, and nail bombs are so loud that even if no one sees the explosion, everybody in the area will hear it and investigate. This is the perfect distraction for your ghost runs, or the perfect decoy to take them out silently. On screen right now is a perfect example of how Molotovs can be used as decoys for quieter kills. This is Big Sister at helm, and in this picture she was trying to throw a Molotov at these two guys but miscalculated her throw and threw it way beyond them. This, however, turned out for the better because the two thugs got startled at the flames and thought that Joel was behind them, turning their backs at Big Sister who, now improvising, approached them quietly, taking one as hostage, head-shooting the other, and then strangling the first. This scene not only proves that Molotovs can work in non-lethal ways, but also serves as even more evidence of the adaptive gameplay provided by the phenomenal AI of this game. And the same applies with your firearms. You can easily draw enemies to one area by firing shots at the ground, and then quietly move away from the hotspot before they arrive. You can use that same technique to set traps for your enemies, and the good thing about firearms is that they are louder than bricks and bottles, so you can make better distractions and decoys with them, and retain your bricks and bottles for stunning your enemies, or as melee weapons or for quieter distractions. Talking about bricks and bottles, you don't always have to use them in close quarter situations. Sometimes you can throw a brick at an enemy far away so you can better land an arrow without making noise with your guns and leaving your hide spot. The same goes for smoke bombs. I was so happy when I discovered that this game has smoke bombs, because that means it is a full-fledged stealth game. Smoke in this game is hard to craft, but very useful. Not only is it good for creating cover so you can move without being seen, but you can also use it as an effective weapon as well. To put it in simple terms, the smoke works like a brick, but multiplied, because you can stun not just one enemy, but 2 or 3 at the same time, making them vulnerable for close-quarter takedowns in grand Assassin's Creed fashion, or even better, holding them still for you to shoot them down from afar. Using shifts is the quickest and quietest way to take down an enemy in the game. However, I will surprise most of you by telling you that melee weapons, particularly instant kill weapons like the machete, the hatchet, and any upgraded blunt weapon work almost as silently as a shiv. Even if enemies are nearby, they will not hear you strike down their companions if you instant kill them with one of these weapons, what makes them a reliable alternative to the shiv when you lack one of those. Also, the melee weapon is way faster than silent takedowns or even shiv takedowns, because it only takes 1 input and not 2. This technique of using melee weapons for stealth is very evident and useful in the cabin encounter, in which you are handling a group of brigands in a relatively small area. If you use arrows for noise distractions, yes, even that is possible in this game, all the better. The same applies with the bricks and bottles when you use them as weapons. They technically make no noise. The only way they hear them is if you throw them at the environment, not at the enemy, and not even if you attack them directly, even if it might sound loud. Joel is a pretty loud fighter, although no one seems to notice. Be aware that using melee weapons in a stealthy manner work better with human opponents. All types of infected hear basically everything except for the cheap and silent takedowns. This is very noticeable in the Colorado University encounter, in which striking this clicker down with my machete instantly attracted the whole bunch across the whole dormitory. I measure a good stealth game in terms of AI quality, system functionality and reliability, tool versatility and level design. You know you encountered a great stealth game when you play for 200 hours and still find new ways of doing things. When a creative idea occurs to you, you try it out and it works most of the time. When you realize that all the experience you had in other stealth games can be carried over to this one, and when techniques like the 1-2s work consistently in different moments of the game. Headshot one guard and then strangle the other. Throw a cocktail molotov at one clicker and then shift takedown the other. Shoot down one infected and then behead the other with your machete. Or gun down one enemy and stab the other nearby. Fire a silent arrow at one soldier before choking the other. Or brick stun one brigand before stabbing the next in the neck. Try it out with different tools and weapons and it works consistently. Rare as it might sound, this consistency is a luxury that is absent in many other games. After I finished playing The Last of Us the first time, I started playing Assassin's Creed Unity, and the difference between one game and the other is jarringly evident. It's funny that a 50-something-year-old man is a more agile and efficient stealth protagonist than Arnold Orion, who is supposedly vibrant with youth, speed and health, simply because The Last of Us is a very well-designed and polished game, while AC Unity unfortunately is a buggy mess. These were games that I knew about long before playing them, and I have seen a lot of gameplay videos on both across the years. But when I played each one of them, I found out that I could carry all that knowledge and my own personal experience with video games easily to one and not so easily to the other. And that is mainly because one game is well designed and polished, while the other is not. Many of these already mentioned stealth tactics common among stealth players can be carried over to Unity and other AC games, but it will be harder simply because of a lack of polish. The Last of Us is a great game, and for those that still aren't convinced, then see it this way. There wouldn't be as many gameplay clips around this franchise if the core gameplay was boring and unresponsive. Hardcore gamers can have a lot of fun with this game, not just casual players that are here mainly for the story. My biggest advice for gamers that struggle to like this game is to embrace the stealth and experiment with the game's systems. If you do these two things, you will most likely enjoy the game more. Another thing this game does perfectly is the writing of both story and characters. The story in this game is a very common one, not particularly groundbreaking or anything, but the execution is perfect. The characters, though, are the true heart and soul of this game. Not only are they all perfectly acted by their respective actors, but they are all extremely relatable. This is something that other games afterwards never seemed to nail as perfectly as this original so-called walking simulator did. The Last of Us works because the characters are all humanely written, and their stories and arguments are relatable. Joel's grief and fear of being in the same vulnerable position again is relatable. Ellie's fear of being alone is relatable. Henry's sense of duty towards his kid brother is relatable. Or Sam's loneliness and frustrated child spirit. Or Tessa's fear of dying and wanting her death to mean something. Or Bill's heartbreak and loner attitude. Or Tommy resenting his older brother, but also missing him and wanting him to stay. The situations in this game are humanely written and mature in depth, a depth that future games that imitate The Last of Us doesn't always nail. People have to accept that The Last of Us is not the game that transformed all games into over-the-shoulder camera experiences with endless walking segments. This game is what it is, and what it does great. The problem is not this original game. The problem comes from the follow-ups, the divisive sequels and the long string of imitators that attempt to replicate the magic of the original product without fully understanding what made the original product so special in the first place. Hating and blaming The Last of Us is like hating and blaming Dark Souls for the endless streak of Souls-likes that not all manage to capture the essence of the From Software game design or do not attempt to do their own thing with the idea. Or hating the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings trilogy or Game of Thrones because of the mediocre fantasy flicks and shows that followed afterwards, trying to capitalize on the success of the former. It's almost like these sequels and copycats learned the wrong lessons from their predecessor. People like the characters of The Last of Us and how they interact with one another, so instead of building on the writing per se, these other games instead give us walking segments thrice as long as anything the original game ever gave us. People like the gameplay of The Last of Us, so let's make a copycat that is slower, less responsive, worse AI, worse level design, less versatility in the tools department, and when in doubt, cram in a lot of quick-time events and cinematic set pieces that will play exactly the same way each and every time you play the game.
Is anyone there? Die already!
People like the story of The Last of Us, so let's find a way to subvert it. Let's turn the widely beloved Ellie into an ungrateful little brat, and even better, let's make a game in which Joel, instead of saving Ellie, kills her, and since people won't obviously like that game, let us conveniently turn Joel into a woman so people call it a masterpiece instead, of course. This is without saying that the writing in these games is, most of the time, contrived and at times even childish when put in contrast to the more subtle and thought-provoking original game. And then we have the characters themselves. When you compare the character of Joel to some of his imitators, who are constantly trying to deliver an Oscar-winning performance without truly building stakes and relatability, you can clearly see the difference in writing that I just described. Joel is a character that gradually builds relatability and emotion, and thus, when these dramatic moments come, you are 100% invested in him. A character that is constantly crying, getting hurt, giving speeches and in the end under-delivering becomes boring very quickly. Joel is way more reserved in all of these aspects, and as such, when stuff happens, each one of these happenings feel more impactful. This original game was also the best at understanding the value of what the characters stand for. Joel and Ellie serve as the perfect example. Joel is a parental character, the adult guardian that defends and mentors his ward while learning himself in the process. Ellie is the daughter figure, the child character that learns from the adult but also brings the good out of him, slowly helping him cope with his own issues and in the end become a better person. The game understood the roles that its characters played and never subverted, never disrespected those roles and what each one of them mean for the other as well as the audience. You destroy this type of story the moment you have the child character disrespect and belittle her guardian and father figure, and you also destroy this type of story the moment you have the guardian character raise her hand in violence against her ward and prioritize anything over him. This is simply the type of story and characters that you do not mess around with. The unfaithful sequels and bad copycats perfectly prove this point. Now, this is not to say that these games are bad. Some of them do have their merits even if they are far from perfect. Some of them might even have potential if they are ever released. And some of them I personally like very much despite their flaws. If you enjoy any of the titles here, even if they got trash talked by me throughout the video, then more power to you. That being said, I think we can all agree that the original The Last of Us is the superior game, and that many of the things people criticize this game for are in truth more flaws of the follow-ups and flaws that pertain to the original. Yes, there are walking segments in this game, but none outstay their welcome as some walking segments in future games would do. The game has its quick-time events, but once again, not as many as other games which simply abuse of this. You actually get to play the game instead of watching an interactive movie, like many of these follow-ups can turn out to be eventually if they overdo it with the quick-time events. The Last of Us is a great game, well deserving of all the praise and success that it has garnered across the years, and it is not just because of the story or the pacing or even the gameplay, but because of all of these things combined along with the protagonist Joel Miller, whose quality is often taken for granted by both players and developers, but when missing it becomes jarringly evident. Joel's absence in the sequel is part of what makes it inferior to its predecessor, and the inability of the imitators of recapturing the depth and true maturity in writing that composed Joel's character in the first place is part of what makes these other games inferior. The resonance of Joel as a character is the main reason to why The Last of Us is a narrative masterpiece. If Naughty Dogs hadn't nailed the writing of their protagonist, the rest of the game, good as it is, wouldn't have hung together as tightly as it did. Usually, when it comes to games, you have to choose between a fun gaming experience with a bad story or a compelling narrative experience with bad gameplay. The Last of Us, however, is one of the few, if not the only, linear cinematic and narrative-driven experience that is actually a true 10 out of 10 game. One of the few games that I can invest myself 100% because the story is well written and the characters are truly likable and interesting and the gameplay actually works. And I don't like when people start shitting on this game because of the scenes of the sons. What future game designers need to do whenever they try to replicate the Last of Us formula is to nail the pacing, make their characters relatable to the audience with truly mature themes and humane affairs, and not the pie in the skies that most sequels and imitators tend to do, and of course, build a solid gameplay loop to maintain things flowing seamlessly. Another good thing to keep in mind is that they shouldn't strive to make the games longer, because the original The Last of Us had the perfect runtime. This is a truly memorable, perfectly paced and balanced experience that respects your time. I could go on and on with 100 more reasons to why this game is so great and why it's a personal favorite of mine, but I've said more than enough at this point. If you haven't, for any reason, played this game yet, then you should. The Last of Us is that type of experience that anyone that is remotely interested in video games or storytelling in general should have at any moment of his or her life. However, if you can afford a PlayStation machine, then I would seriously recommend you play it there, whether it is the PS3 or 4 or 5 or Plus or 6 when the second remake comes out. But play it on a PlayStation because the PC version is really not that good. Even if this version is miles better now than it was on launch, it is still not the most solid of PlayStation's PC ports. There are several graphical glitches each time I play the game, and I had around 3 crashes while recording for the sake of this video. The PC version is great for those that could never experience this game on its original hardware, and it is also recommendable if you want to install mods. Who knows, maybe you want to play as beardless Joel or young Joel, but aside of that, the PS5 version will provide a more stable experience. So that's it for today. If you're interested or if you enjoyed yourself, subscribe, press the like button and share the video because all of that helps. Stay safe, love you all, and I'll see you in the next one.